Okay. Good evening, members. Welcome to this meeting of Braintree District Council Cabinet. Can I start by welcoming our new Chief Executive, Dan Gascoigne, to his first meeting of Cabinet, one of many, I hope, in your time with us. Welcome, Dan. Move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Mann. I don't think we have any other apologies, Jessica?
Not aware of any other apologies, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest any member wishes to declare at this time? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I declare non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council who are likely to either be currently are in reports or will certainly be referred to in reports as we go through the meeting? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham, and I similarly will make the same declaration. Any others? No? Okay, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 25th of July, they were circulated. Are you happy that they are a true record? And that I signed them, which I will do at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Public question time. I've not received any notification of any members of the public wishing to put any questions. That will then take us on to item 5 under climate change and the environment. And the first item is to receive the Partnership Development Scrutiny Committee's review of enforcement procedures. And I'm delighted that the chairman of the committee, Councillor Mary Cunningham, is with us this evening. I'm going to ask her to say a few words in introducing that, and then ask Councillor Wendy Schmidt to lead the response. So, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say a few words on the Enforcement Scrutiny Review. It was, I think, a welcome review by all of the committee. We all learnt that there are areas of the council with enforcement that we had no idea that enforcement took place. So it was a bit of an eye-opener. And I'd also like to acknowledge our thanks to the number of officers that actually came to, I think it was 4 or 5 meetings, because we started this in the early stages of the pandemic, and those officers were obviously busy on other things, but they found the time to come to the meetings and were very generous with their time, both at the meetings and any questions we raised afterwards. So I would like to acknowledge thanks on behalf of the Partnership Committee to them. There's a couple of, one observation that came out, and it's not a criticism, it's purely an observation that came to light in a few of the presentations, that there seems to be sometimes a barrier to enforcement where the authority has to weigh up the cost of the finance and the human resources of the authority against the value to be recouped. And I think that's an interesting one, an interesting concept to think about, because we're always kind of critical, maybe there's not enough enforcement going on, but I think we always have to look at that side of it. The responses that I have received to the recommendations, but I'm very, very happy with those. There are 2 that actually I would just like to highlight. Recommendation 3, this was on the recommendation following the revenues and benefits presentation. I think we all learned a huge amount on that one, and the recommendation was that we have a members' evening, and I note that you are suggesting putting it into 22-23's members' training programme. When we did this, it was, I think, early spring this year, obviously before a COVID crisis was even mentioned or imagined. And I just wonder if maybe it's possible to look at that again and see that if that members' evening could be brought forward, because I think the information that members would get from that presentation would be very valuable in the present times as we're sort of entering this crisis. That's just an observation of mine. The other recommendation 4, which referred to the Community Safety Partnership, we all recognise the tremendous work that goes on there. There are a couple of organisations, one with the smaller housing associations and social services that weren't always as regular in attending their committee, and if they could be encouraged to do so, because they could actually provide perhaps some of the information that's perhaps missing on an investigation. So that was a really worthwhile to try and encourage them. And I think that's probably all I want to say. But finally, just to offer my thanks to governance, and in particular Jessica, who has put in a huge amount of work. I mean, whatever we asked her to do, she did diligently, quickly, came back with the goods, and the officers to help us. So our very grateful thanks to Jessica. So thank you. I think that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Cunningham. The report actually cuts across, I think, 5 or 6 Cabinet members' portfolios, but Councillor Mrs Schmidt is going to lead the response on this, although she may invite members to contribute in their particular areas if necessary. Councillor Mrs Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd very much like to thank Councillor Mrs Cunningham, her committee, and of course, as you said yourself, the officers who contributed towards this report. Yes, you highlighted something very important, what you called a barrier to enforcement. Yes, sometimes our staff have to make very difficult decisions where they weigh up the pros and cons. And I'm very glad that you and the committee were aware of this. Sadly, one thinks that if a law or a rule or regulation is concerned, that it's cut and dried, it's black or white. But sadly, in a lot of cases, it isn't that. And we always have to be aware of the taxpayers' finances, quite frankly, on some of these cases, which I'm sure you can understand is exceedingly frustrating for the officers concerned, who have done some spectacular work often on these cases. And also it doesn't help that if we take them to court and the court doesn't realise what it is that we're actually trying to do. But on the whole, we are very fortunate with most of our court cases. I'll just briefly, because members have got the report, I'll just briefly go through each particular response to the recommendations. Item 4, health and safety. Again, as you realise, nothing is straightforward. We have our own health and safety manager, but then, of course, there's the food and the health and safety team, the environmental health and so on, and then, of course, the outside bodies, again, we're exceedingly fortunate with our officers that, as you know, working together in this council is something that makes it such a successful council. So, recommendation 1, services that regularly work with multiple partners with enforcement. Yes, we agree that we would get the web pages updated and the directories updated. It's something that needs to be looked at frequently because things change so frequently. And again, we have to take off COVID, put it on, whatever happens, things change. So yes, people are aware that this needs to be done. Recommendation 2, the council should consider appointing a group of authorised officers who have ample knowledge across services, etc. Again, something that I've just said, that this council is very proud of, that there is really cross-department working always here, and that an internal authorised officer enforcement forum will be created to encourage even more of it. The Community Safety Partnership came under that as well. And again, that comes up further down. Oops, have I gone out of order? No, there we are. So we'll discuss that under the Community Safety Partnership one. Recommendation 3 about the revs and bends. Councillor McKee, do you have anything you wish to add to this, particularly in regard to what Councillor Mrs Cunningham has just mentioned?
Thank you, Councillor. I do actually, and I agree with you, and I'll tell you why I agree with you. I think we, I get at portfolio reviews all the information about how much enforcement goes on to protect the council and to make sure taxpayers are paying their due share. And we're actually very good at it. But I think it's something that's a dark art, and I mean, not in the sense it's under the counter, but it is something that no one sees happening unless you're in the portfolio, and you've now discovered what the portfolio holders and finance have known for a long time is we're pretty good at enforcing that service. So I think it's appropriate, and I agree with you, the sooner the better, really, so that people can get a handle on exactly what we're doing by way of enforcement in that area. It's world class, actually.
Councillor Mrs Cunningham. Could you put your microphone on?
Sorry about that. Not only on the enforcement side, but I think members would do well to learn the actual arrangements that we have in this authority where, and this will be happening in the cost of living crisis, residents will be undoubtedly be having difficulty in paying and actually laying out the systems in place to help members. But also the way the revenues, we're tax collectors too, so it's a very, very good lesson for members. We learned a huge amount from that. Thank you.
I agree entirely, because actually you can't cover enforcement unless you cover how the service operates and why enforcement comes into, or not, because not everything is a brittle, you owe us some money, as you well know, there's some sympathy and some real care for the residents, as well as enforcing. I mean, fraud is often DWP, but you'll find out that when the conversation takes place about how we go around with our council tax collection. And it is not as easy as people think it is. You know, something that's measured, and it's public knowledge where we are against our collection rates. We tend to also compare ourselves against other authorities, and that's the way you'd expect it. So that could all be covered in the members' evening, and you'll see just what a great grip they have on the situation.
I wondered, Councillor McKee, if you could discuss with officers whether it might be possible to squeeze that in sooner rather than later. I think I'm picking up the point that Councillor Mrs Cunningham is making, that there is a strong possibility that more of our residents will need help and assistance and will be coming to members. And I think the opportunity for members to be aware of what's done. So whilst the recommendation was for 23-24, if we could squeeze it in as soon as possible, I think that would be welcome. Can I leave that with you to deal with, please?
Consider it done. I mean, I think there's a members' evening on something that I could probably add this onto the agenda and do less on one and more on this.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor Mr Schmidt.
I'll come to recommendation 4.8, and I'm sure Councillor Ricky would like to speak on this, but possibly taking 4.63 at the same time, if he so wishes. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Leader. Welcome the recommendation. With regards to enforcement when it comes to housing, with regards to CSP, we do have a really good track record of housing associations working with us outside of the CSP when it comes to taking enforcement action. A really good track record, in fact, and obviously enforcement's obviously one of the last resorts that we want to take, but when we have to partner up with them, they are extremely responsive, knowledgeable, and follow set procedures. With regards to getting them to attend CSPs, it's not usually the norm. However, we will make a consideration around inviting, obviously, some of the social services side, where we do have due influence on, to get them to attend the relevant CSPs if there is either a spike or issues around enforcement needing to occur. Unfortunately, we don't have the same jurisdiction with externals in being able to mandate that they turn up to these meetings, but often is the case, just through invite and collaboration, they will turn up and take part. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for anyone watching and wondering what CSP is, it's Community Safety Partnership.
Apologies.
It's okay. Right, let's carry back to you, Councillor Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Ritchie there. Having had the portfolio for so long, we have very enthusiastic members and those, shall we say, who are less than enthusiastic or possibly push for time. But I think otherwise it's certainly a very, very good, useful committee. Recommendation 6 was about KPIs. Gosh, I've forgotten what KPI actually means.
Key performance indicators.
That's it. Oh, gosh, so it is. You just use these initials for so many years. Against enforcement activities. Well, in principle, as you see, we agree with that, and it's quite simple with things, some things. But when you think about it with others, for example, littering, of which we have a very, very proud record when you compare us to other authorities, should we say, unless it's an authority that brings in outside enforcement and uses it as a fundraising activity, which is something a route we would never go down. So it's quite difficult because we don't know how many people in any given time would be dropping litter or fly tipping and how many we would catch. And so KPIs are quite difficult regarding enforcement. And some of them, of course, particularly environmental health, are extremely complex cases and may take many months to come to fruition with a result or otherwise. And so it really isn't as straightforward, dare I say it, compared to finances even, just as an easier one, that this is what it's going to be each quarter. So the team are looking at it, but it is a very complex area and not that simple. But as I said, we certainly know we have an extremely good record on enforcement where possible. Recommendation 7.
Sorry. Councillor Tattersley.
Yes, thank you about that one. Enforcement and prosecutions are a key performance outcome measure that's recognised throughout the country, and particularly by the government and people like Tidy Britain, or whatever they call themselves this week. And I mentioned specifically the number of prosecutions that we take for fly tipping and for littering as compared to other neighbouring authorities. And I think when you look at the KPIs for that, we should be really proud of it. And I don't think it's any accident that we are recognised as having one of the cleanest districts in the country for littering and fly tipping, with a possible exception of areas around the A12. I know, that's an intermittent problem. But the key performance indicators, I think are a good measure, and it's the only ones that the government look at when they're measuring councils against their outcomes on littering and fly tipping in particular. And the staff that do it should be really proud of themselves. And of course, Councillor Schmidt, who's driven this mercilessly.
Thank you, Councillor Tattersley. Councillor Schmidt.
Thank you. You sort of spoiled now what I was going to say, that because we've been in the forefront of tackling litter with, as you know, our tosser campaigns and things like this, which have received national acclaim, sometimes you do yourself out of things, because we like to think that our public aren't as bad as others, but as long as we have major routes through, we know that others don't care so much. But I thank Councillor Tattersley for those words. As I said, we have first-rate staff. Now, I must say, when it came to recommendation 7, I was completely thrown to start with, because I thought, what's trees got to do with enforcement? Because any enforcement on trees are TPOs, or if you're planning a particular development, trees are cut down when they shouldn't be, or they're not planted when they should be. And these, of course, are planning enforcement issues. And this committee was tasked with not looking at planning enforcement because this was being done elsewhere. But when I got the back papers and saw that it was more about trees and hedges and then the tree strategy, all I would say is that indeed the tree strategy is already being worked on, and as has been done in the past, we will be getting views from our many groups who work out there. Not a specific group. We will be getting inputs from those that we have over the years. And so I would like to leave it at that, that they have been tasked that it will be finished before the end of this financial year. And that's all I think there is on that then, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Any other comments from anyone? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Regarding recommendation 6, fully agree about the very good work the council does, and it's excellent working with officers of the council on this, but I think we should pay huge tribute also to the parish councils and volunteers who do so much on picking up litter and also reporting fire tips and working with officers. On recommendation 7, just a point of information really, and the Cabinet members just repeated this, what it says in the report, that trees are only protected by TPOs or by specific planning consents. They are also protected actually if they're in conservation areas above a certain size. So I think perhaps the scrutiny report, I don't know if it can be retrospectively changed to include that, but it's a point of fact that they are. The report also says how valuable it is to save trees and hedges on development sites, and I totally agree with that, but I'll say it again, it is not happening on many development sites. Jimpsons, Witham, Redrow, Silver End, Belway, Rivenhall, sites in Cressing, where I and others have documented catastrophic losses of trees and hedges. So, looking to the future, I for one would request and urge that the new tree strategy does maximise retaining trees and hedges wherever possible on development sites. And this year I think we've seen a very specific reason why we need to do that, and that is that establishing new trees is very difficult with climate change. I mean, if you look at the development sites around the district this year, a lot of new trees are struggling because it's so dry and so hot, whereas the established trees survive a lot better. So perhaps that could also be included in the strategy. Thank you.
Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mr. Schmidt.
I will repeat again, these are planning enforcement matters, and this committee was tasked not to look at planning enforcement matters. And so, although I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Abbott, I mean, everyone knows about my passion for trees for the last 50-odd years, but it is not, or was not, the remit of this group to look at planning matters. So I'm not sure if there is an ongoing planning enforcement group going on. Councillor Mrs Spray might be able to add, but it cannot be added to this because this is not about planning enforcement.
Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Schmidt. There isn't a specific ongoing enforcement study into trees, but it is a constant theme with the enforcement team and the development management team that when planning applications come forward, there is considerable time and effort put in by the planning department as to how trees and hedgerows are dealt with on proposed sites. And where there are TPOs in place already, which frequently they are, then the absolute utmost is done in order to preserve those trees. But as I'm sure Councillor Abbott is aware, on sites where there are trees, where there's no TPO in place, a landowner has every right to chop down or lop those trees, and there's nothing that enforcement or planning officers can actually do about it. And that applies to any landowner.
whether it's in your garden or on a major development site. If it's not a protected tree, then you can take it down. As I say, having said that, officers, when they are looking at planning applications, always do their utmost to try and preserve as much as they can in the way of trees and hedges. Where they have to be removed in order for a development to go ahead, then we do ask developers to replant and provide additional planting to a high standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it might be worth, when the tree strategy, who's got responsibility for the tree strategy, there should be some reference. It seems to me it would be odd to have a tree strategy which didn't make reference, even if it's only just to state what the position is in regard to the
present one does, and the new one will be just the
yeah.
same.
So I think that hopefully will pick up the point that it won't be left out of the strategy entirely, but recognising that obviously the amount of power, if you like, that the authority have is limited at the moment by statute. Did you want to come back? Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, if I can, Chairman. Well, in response to Councillor Schmidt, I'm only speaking to what's on the agenda. So, in response to Councillor Spray, I'm sorry I don't recognise what she said. On all of these sites, hundreds of trees, hundreds of metres of hedges have been taken out on the periphery of the sites, on the boundaries, not within the site. And I will keep saying it while it happens, and many residents get very upset about this. We need to be doing more as an authority, working together to protect trees where we can on development sites.
I think what Councillor Mrs Spray was saying, though, is that we may wish to encourage people not to do it, but we don't actually, in many cases, have any power for that to take place. And I think that's the difference. But we will pick up in the tree strategy. I think there needs to be a bit about this issue, because I do know it does cause, and Councillors Cunningham, Ritchie and myself had similar sort of things with the development of Horizon 120 and also GigaClear on the thing. So it's not just something which only happens in parts. So we will pick that up. Okay? Right. Now, item 5 says there's no financial implications from the recommendations. Therefore, there's no requirement to take the report to full council. Councillor Mrs Cunningham, first of all, are you happy that we've picked up the points that your committee have made? Clearly, your committee may wish to keep an eye on us in its scrutiny role, that this report isn't the end of everything. But is there anything else you want to add before we move on? Okay, fine. You're happy then to, members of Cabinet, that we note the report and commit ourselves to the actions that we've put down there. Thank you. Right, let us move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Cabinet's response to the Community Development Scrutiny Committee's review into cycling and walking in the Braintree District. This committee was chaired by Councillor Mrs Garrod. And as previously, I'll ask Councillor Mrs Garrod to make a few initial remarks before handing over to Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Mrs Garrod.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I put forward this scrutiny topic way back in July 2020, when the then Prime Minister officially launched the cycling and walking revolution and wanted to invest £2 billion with ambitious plans to bring about a golden age of cycling. It seemed like a very good idea to me at the time. I'd had a look at the current cycling strategy that the council had and felt that it was outdated. But unbeknown to me, officers were already looking at that, and the cycling strategy was being produced, or started to be produced, alongside. But we decided to continue because we felt that two heads were greater than one, and that we may come up with some good ideas. Very pleased with the response that Cabinet have given me, but there are just 3 things that I would like to bring to their attention. So with regards to recommendation number 4, open access land. Now, my recommendation here is that we
that a document be produced, particularly online, containing a list of open access land within Essex. I do feel that with regards to the walking aspect of this, it's quite important that residents are properly informed about what land is available for them to access and walk freely upon. The feedback I've got here is that it's a little bit cost prohibitive, but I would like Braintree to push Essex on this to try and get something comprehensive so that residents know exactly where they can and cannot go. The second recommendation is recommendation number 5, which is about cycle storage, sometimes better known as just parking your bike. Personally, I found that if I'm going to cycle somewhere, I'm going to want to park my bike safely where it's not going to get stolen. The problem is there are a lot of thefts. And I don't feel that the cycle storage is always adequate, or that the information where people can obtain the information before their journey to find where they can park their bike is also adequate. And that is something I would still like to push with the cycling strategy, if that can be incorporated. The council had a grant facility which they opened up to certain areas, businesses, but only had, I think, 3 responses, which is not particularly good. I would have liked to have seen that opened up to more businesses, particularly in some of the rural areas. So if that is ever run again, I would like to see that. Particularly in my ward, I know that the chair of Steeple Bumpstead Parish Council is a very enthusiastic cyclist, and was a little bit disappointed that grant didn't run out to our area. And finally, recommendation 9. The Essex County Council right-of-way improvement plan. Now, that is currently on the internet, dated 2009. The response I've received from Cabinet today is that it is currently undergoing governance and will be approved in autumn 2022. So if we look at gov.uk, it gives guidance on this particular policy and plan, and it says that it should be reviewed every 10 years, that there should be adequate consultation with district and parish councils, and that's just 2 points I've picked up on. I haven't seen those. I haven't seen any implementation or initiation of this improvement plan being looked at. So how they're going to get to approve this, as we are in autumn now, I do not know. And that is obviously quite important. The public right, or the rights of way improvement plan is a result of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, and I think it is very important that our public rights of way are maintained appropriately for people to walk on and enjoy. And I don't feel that Essex have given this the right kind of attention, timely attention that has occurred here. And that's my only comments, really. Otherwise, it's looking really good. The cycling strategy is absolutely amazing. It's coming along really well. And I can see a great deal of work has gone in alongside that. So I'm very happy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Garrett. Councillor Ritchie, I'll ask you to comment on the report, and if you could make particular reference to the 3 points that the Chairman of the Committee has raised in respect to the recommendations 4, 5 and 9.
Thank you, Leader. So thank you for that introduction, Councillor Garrett, and thank you for your kind words as well. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of work that's gone into the cycling strategy. So following the adoption of the cycling strategy in 2021, I welcome the feedback from the Community Development Scrutiny Committee into cycling and walking in the Braintree district. And indeed, I thoroughly enjoyed being part of that scrutiny panel as well for that one special evening. Thank you. The cycling strategy is currently in its first year, and a report of such will be presented to full council later this month. Subsequent to the cycle strategy, the climate change strategy and the local plan have been adopted, which together contribute to supporting better physical and mental health and reducing our impact on the environment, as well as congestion on our roads. The Council Draft Cycling Implementation Plan consists of a 5-year plan and a number of quick win actions identified within the first year. It is currently on track to deliver as predicted. Year 2 actions target larger projects and the progression of the Essex County Council Active Travel Fund project in Braintree Town, the Earlscombe to Kelvedon project by Peter Cohn, and our campaign to make a better connected network of safer routes. It will make cycling an easier option for people to use for local journeys. We continue to partner with the Essex County Council as the Highways Authority to encourage and prioritise cycling within the district, maximising investment in the cycling strategy. Braintree District Council will need to continue this great relationship with Essex County Council colleagues to help deliver the implementation plan. The work to date would not be possible without the invaluable input of the steering group, tremendous contribution, advice and time received from BDC councillors and officers, and local knowledge experts such as Peter Cohn and Chris McCann and Lee Crabb have helped to progress this strategy. The input and support from Julian Sanchez of Essex County Council has been instrumental in assisting us to progress cycling behaviour change within the district. We are aiming to make cycling an easy option for people to use for local journeys. Promotion of cycling has not only been communicated to our residents for those short journeys and businesses for commuting, but also to visitors through the Visit Braintree site. Cycling is cheap, healthy and a pollution-free way for people to get around the district, and we want to make the local transport network as safe and convenient for cycling as possible. We can only do this through partnering with key stakeholders, receiving reviews such as from the Community Scrutiny Committee, and making the investment to improve and maintain the cycling infrastructure. As outlined in our response to the scrutiny report, we are continuing to improve all areas of cycling and walking in the district. However, we still face challenges in persuading more residents that cycling can be a part of their lives. Progression of the implementation plan will start to address the barriers to the wider participation, which will help meet our transport and health priorities, as well as attracting funding improvements. Just to add for the recommendations that you mentioned, Councillor Garrett, recommendation number 4 I will take first, and it was a really good point that you brought up. We are working with Essex County Council as the responsible authority to keep those plans and maps updated. We do have it on our Visit Braintree page as well, so there is a link to that page, so we actively encourage people to use that. But as you say, the information is only as good as what's updated and current. We will continue to push to make sure that those within the Braintree district are the most current for everyone to be able to use. Recommendation number 5 was about the cycling storage. The grant that we had at the time was specifically targeting businesses to apply for that grant. I know there is a plan between myself and Louise to try and extend this plan beyond businesses. But like I said at the time, that was only trying to target some of those businesses to increase use for people working at industrial estates to be able to get to and from home to work and to be able to park their bicycle in a secure spot. But the recommendation does say we will look to push that further and include town and parish council. So as soon as we get some information on that, I'll let you know, so you can let your chairman know of your parish council. The last one, which was recommendation number 9, completely agree about the vote, but again, it's an Essex County Council led initiative. But hand in hand with our cycling strategy and walking strategy, we will continue to push. And we have a great advocate in Julian Sanchez, Essex County Council. Many of us have had a number of meetings with him throughout this cycling strategy, and indeed through the ATF, which Ali was also present at too. He's a good advocate and a champion for wanting to improve walking and cycling, not just for within Braintree and our aspirations, but across the wider Essex County as well. Lastly, if it's okay, I'd just like to quickly just mention under the point 2.4, the Coggeshall to Earlscombe route. I think it would be remiss of us not to mention that the local highways panel actually funded an additional £20,000 to help bring some of their aspirations to a planning stage with some detailed, some more detailed investigations. And again, testament to Peter Cohn, who is driving that from a public perspective and is a valued member of our scrutiny committee for the cycling strategy too. I think I'll stop there. Thank you, Leader. But just to add that, welcome all the responses and recommendations, and suggest that we accept those. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie, are there any other comments or questions anyone wants to have? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of points, Mr. Chairman. On the public rights of way improvements, so I think there's two issues here. One is it might not be directly relevant, but maintenance of public rights of way has declined in recent years, and certainly in the areas I represent and know where the local community uses the public rights of way, people will sometimes literally go out with a pair of secateurs and shears to try and get through. And these are very long established public rights of way because they're not being maintained either by the landowner or Essex County Council. So there's an issue there. Secondly, in terms of improvements, public rights of way are so important, but the process by which we get new ones or connecting up existing ones is so painfully slow. So we were directed one scheme I've been involved with to the LHP, and the scheme is now on there. It's been on there about 4 years, I think. It's a logical connection. But I first suggested it to the County Council 20 years ago, and it's still not been done. And it's literally a field margin. So these things seem to take forever. On cycling, I totally agree with what Councillor Ricky said. The progress on this is fantastic. And I'm a member of the cycling steering group as well. I just think we need to think more about how we deliver this across the whole district. So E2CK is great, Brentford Town Centre is great, but I think there's a huge opportunity, and I know he knows what I'm going to say because I say it every meeting, to join up the larger villages and towns with cycle routes which will be sort of 3 or 4 miles long, which are doable commuting distances and distances for children to get to school, the older ones. Because currently the roads connecting those villages and towns, like the B1018, or the road through Silverend and Cressing, you cycle along there and you take your life in your hands. So I think that's where I think we need to, we would have some big win-wins there. And from a money perspective, of course, if we can get more people cycling and walking, there's less pressure on having to spend much greater sums of money on road building.
Thank you very much. Any other comments at all? No? Councillor Mrs Garrett, are you happy with what you've heard from the Cabinet member?
I am very happy. I do appreciate that the items I've raised with regards to Essex County Council are not always easy to initiate, and we can only work with them as best we can to encourage them as best we can. And with regards to Councillor Abbott's comments, Peter Cohn has done a tremendous amount of work to try and get a route from Earlscombe to Coggeshall, and I think I do hope that finally comes to fruition. Certainly it seems on track to do that, and I think once that's established, perhaps people will then look at other routes between villages, and we can hope that this evolves in the way that we would like it to. But thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Rishi.
Okay, thank you, Ms Garrett. Members of Cabinet, you happy then to approve the responses to the recommendations? Agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to item 7A. Now, Councillor Radley, who is chairman of the Performance Management Scrutiny, is not here, but we will take the report. Councillor Van Dolken, you are the Cabinet member for Operations and Commercialisation. I leave it to you to take us through, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And so I don't have an inquisitor. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The Commercialisation Scrutiny Report, which you all have read, is to formally present the recommendations of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee to Cabinet, and for Cabinet to provide a full response. This scrutiny report was a result of 3 meetings during 2021, and I'd like to thank the members of the SC for its diligence and its excellent recommendations. Not to forget, of course, officers from many areas who contributed their time and expertise. I won't go into great detail of the recommendations and the responses, as members will have read the report, but just to paraphrase the committee recommendations and the responses. Recommendation 1 was to continue to have a permanent full-time commercialisation manager. This post has been empty for over a year. I think it said 13 months. Indeed, the Cabinet response is to not accept this recommendation, but rather to have a commercialisation group, which would be led by the procurement lead and sponsored by Suzanne Bennett as the corporate director. Recommendation 2 was to explore more opportunities for collaborative working with other local authorities, an area in which we have some success through the procurement in Essex and also our payroll and a few other things. And this is agreed by Cabinet. It's something we want to do, and we have a good track record. And I think that we are well respected by other neighbouring authorities. Recommendations 3 and 4, I'll take them together, to examine the cost and income of all traded services to identify those which have a net benefit to the authority. And further opportunities to be explored to improve the return of the existing commercial services, such as, or the trading services, such as waste, in particular, trade waste, I should say, which is a major income provider. Cabinet response is to certainly accept these recommendations and a sprint review. I don't know why it's called sprint, but perhaps it's quick. A sprint review by a company called Commercial Gov has commenced, and this will benchmark our performance against other authorities, as well as identify further opportunities. This began at the end of September, so just last week or the week before, and it'll be finished in a few weeks. So it's, compared to a lot of reports, this one seems to be done quite quickly. Recommendation 5 is to endorse the excellent approach taken by the Council with the IDP programme and to make this a permanent process going forward. This is agreed by Cabinet, and in fact we are developing that whole area. Recommendation 6, to consider any opportunities for more innovative approaches to commercialisation, such as partnerships or setting up commercial or trading operations, as is done by some other authorities. In fact, I think I read that 65% or so of local authorities do have a trading arm. It's agreed that the Council will continue to look at further innovative opportunities, and our partnership with Essex County Council in procurement should be noted as one of the initial successes. Finally, we come to recommendation 7. The Performance Management Scrutiny Committee would like to receive an annual update on the progress of the IDP to allow for scrutiny. This is agreed by Cabinet, that suitable updates should be provided to the Cabinet, to the committee, as well as to the wider Council. The next steps, the final steps, are as highlighted in paragraph 5, to await the result of the external review on commercialisation, as I said, within a couple of weeks, and to further embed the concept of commercialisation across the Council, starting with the creation of the commercialisation group. I'm pleased that this useful work has been carried out, and in conjunction with the current review by Commercial Gov, the company that's doing the review, we'll have an excellent basis on which to develop Braintree's truly commercial-minded activities, and to help bridge the inevitable funding gaps which are coming at us hard, fast and furious. That is where I will leave it, if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Van Dolken. Any comments or questions from anyone? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you. Just a brief comment, if I may, Chairman. I think to congratulate Councillor Bradley and his committee on a first-class report, which obviously chimes extremely well with the work that the Cabinet, under Councillor Van Dolken and Councillor McKee, are pursuing in terms of an overall financial strategy and the work that's going on by our officer team. I think what comes out of this is an acknowledgement that there's some very real positives to commercialisation, and I'm sure she won't mind me quoting her, but I remember in a public meeting recently, the Deputy Leader of Essex County Council said, commercialism isn't a dirty word. And I think sometimes when we talk commercially, people think it's ruthless profiteering, but actually the reason why we take that approach is to enhance public service delivery, and particularly important in difficult times when calls on the public purse are the demands are very, very high. So I think there's an acknowledgement that there's some really good things to be done. There's some things that can be sensibly and carefully worked through. And what is particularly pleasing in terms, I think, the response Councillor Van Dolken gave is the desire to ensure it's not just a side function working silo. The actual approach is embedded into the whole organisation, and I think that's. I hope Councillor Radley and his committee would find a lot of positives in the response to what's been a very well conducted piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Any other comments at all? Councillor Van Dolken.
If I can just come back and thank Councillor Cunningham for his kind words. I just thought it worth mentioning that, in fact, in my looking at this whole area, it's interesting that the council is a trusted organisation, which is quite a positive. I just leave that there. Also, I've spoken to a few people about something that I have read, that local government employees, some of them don't like the idea of commercialisation, and I'm happy to say that that does not seem to be an issue within our organisation.
Councillor Cunningham. If there are no other comments, are you happy to accept the next steps as outlined in paragraph 5, which is to await the external review of commercialisation and then link that with these recommendations here, and also to proceed to create the group as described in paragraph 4.7. Are you happy to accept that, members of the Cabinet? Great. Thank you. Right, we move on to item 8A. Can I first of all remind colleagues that there was a revised paper 8A which was issued recently, just had a few minor things. So this is the medium-term financial strategy 2022-3 to 2025-26. Last week those could almost be times rather than years, couldn't they? But with the way things have been changing. But I'll pass to Councillor McKee to introduce the paper. Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, I will point out that recommendation 2.2 is no longer needed because of the time frame to making the decision, which was a recommendation to me to delegate the decision. We had to make that decision in September. Otherwise, we would have been too late for us to put our submission in that we want to be part of the pool should the government agree that that pooling process is going to continue. And therefore, with guidance from the legal, I was permitted to execute that agreement, and it was done in the 20. I'll come into my report. So that's not required. All we actually recommendation is to note the report, and I shall start by introducing it. The purpose of the report is to provide the Cabinet with the details of the proposed budget process for 23-24 and to provide an initial update on the issues impacting the Council's medium-term financial strategy. The report covers the current year's financial position, a summary of the latest information regarding the central government's funding, including the decision to participate in an Essex business rate pool for next year, issues which will impact the budget and MTFS, the approach to developing the budget and rolling forward the MTFS, the budget timetable leading up to the meeting of full council on the 20th of February. And there's a timetable at the end of this report I'll just touch on at the end. Economic context, I will talk about it. I think you're all aware of watching the dire stuff on the news last week, that we live in a turbulent times, to say the least. I've never seen anything like it in my economic life. The background has changed significantly and very rapidly since the budget and MTFS was approved in February. Higher inflation exacerbated by high energy costs, which I don't need to tell you about, coupled with increasing interest rates, will see real household incomes falling sharply. The UK economy is forecast to enter recession lasting through till the end of 2023. This will impact the council both directly and very likely increase demands on council services, along with an increased risk to local tax collection and other source of income. To the point you're making, Councillor Cunningham, it's recognised by us that that is highly likely. The current year's budget position, the first detailed review of the council's finances of the current year has recently been completed based on the income and expenditure in the first quarter. The assessment also considered the latest information on the proposed pay award for staff from April 2022. And taking this into account, the forecast is for the net adverse variance of £721,000 for the year. However, this variance is likely to be higher, and we as all local authorities are looking at a tough job balancing the budget in the next 2 years ahead. Managers have been reviewing as a priority their service areas to consider what actions can be taken in the immediate and short term to address the projected financial position. Further detail on Q1 position and the actions to be taken are reported to Cabinet at its meeting on the 10th of October as part of the performance report next Monday, so you haven't got long to wait. Pay Award 2022. Detail of the pay claim submitted by the unions is set out in the report, which also includes the offer now made by the national employers that will give an increase of £1,925 on all pay points, with a percentage increase therefore being weighted towards lower paid staff. An initial estimate of the impact of the offer on the council is circa 6% additional to the pay bill compared to the 2.25% provision within the budget, or an incremental additional £763,000. The offer also includes a proposal to give an extra day's annual leave from April 2023. As yet, the offer has not formally been accepted by the unions. I believe it's true that one particular union still is waiting for their ballot to come back from the members. And you can probably guess what that is. The business rate pool. On the 18th of August, DLUHC wrote to all local authorities inviting their preferred pooling arrangements for the year 2023-24 and stated this intention not to revoke the existing agreements unless requested to do so by local authorities. At a meeting with Essex Finance officers on the 16th September, it was confirmed current participating authorities, except Brentwood, wish to continue with the scheme. The council has considered participating as it is considered financially beneficial to the authority, and we have confirmed our intention to join the pooling arrangement on 16th of September, as I mentioned earlier. Local government funding. The assumptions made by the government at the time of the spending review 2021, which set out 3-year funding totals for the whole of local government, will now be superseded by the latest economic position. Whether any additional funding will be forthcoming is yet to be seen, although recent pronouncements have suggested that council will need to prioritise spending to address the higher inflation. Including the local government finance settlement for 22-23 was a commitment to review the spending needs and resources of council. More recently, a 2-year settlement was being suggested. However, in the absence of any firm announcement, it is now looking more likely that another rollover single-year finance settlement can be expected. There are also still no firm proposals around any changes to the New Homes Bonus Scheme, nor firm commitment to allowing businesses rate pooling to continue, although DLUHC have recently written to local authorities seeking confirmation, as I said earlier. Consultation on options for changing this methodology used for allocating homelessness prevention grant has recently closed. while implementation of new statutory regulations on minimum revenue provision have been deferred until April 2024, and consultation is being undertaken on options on statutory regulations that currently mean changes in the market value of pooled fund investments does not impact the general fund. These regulations are due to end on the 31st of March 2023, and that could be significant if the current regulations do not continue past 2023. Other issues impacting the 23-24 budget and MTFS. Section 7 of the report sets out a range of issues that will impact next year's budget and MTFS in terms of both increased cost pressures but also some positive elements. These issues are the focus of detailed work that is currently underway by the Finance team in preparation for the Cabinet Strategy Workshop in October. Developing the budget and council tax for 23-24 and rolling forward the MTFS for 23-24 to 26-27. Section 8 outlines the approach to updating the budget and MTFS with the announcement of the local government finance settlement expected in mid-December. But if you remember previous years, it tends to be a last-minute gasp when we get that settlement, being a key factor in determining the shortfalls in the council's financing for the next year's budget and MTFS. A refreshed investment and development programme will continue to draw together work streams aimed at closing the budget gap, and senior managers have been tasked with reviewing budgets for their service areas to identify opportunities for savings and efficiency along any budget pressures or priorities, and understand that work is going extremely well. Further reviews are to be commissioned adopting a zero-based budgeting approach, and which will provide better information on budgets and the impact of key variables to support decision-making on resources allocation. Outcomes from the reviews will feed into the Council's budget planning and MTFS as each review area is completed. To support a more measured approach to identifying a longer-term cost reductions, the Council's option to use its reserves and balances in the short term, particularly as funds held are higher than was anticipated when the 22-23 budget was set. So we are in a position with balances that we could in fact balance the budget using those reserves if we chose to do so. Section 9 sets out the key milestones for the budget process, including wider consultation ahead of the February Council when the next year's budget and council tax will need to be agreed. The next step is in your papers is the 10th of October and going through the schedule till the 20th of February Council when we agree the budget. I'll move the recommendation to note the 23-24 budget process timetable as detailed in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Any comments or questions? Councillor Tattersley and then Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. One of the things that we're keeping a very close eye on are the costs of heating our leisure centres and pools. It's a big lump of water to keep up to anything like a temperature, but our leisure provider have managed to get a fixed price for the next couple of years, and we don't anticipate that that will have any impact on our 22-23 years budget. But if there are any news that come forward, I'll certainly make sure that I share that information.
That's good news.
Thank you, Councillor Tattersley. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Firstly, can I again this year welcome the very comprehensive budget timetable as set out on page 82. I think it's something the Council does extremely well in involving all members and relevant parties to the budget process. And then I've got a question. Do we know how many councillor capital bids were submitted before the deadline in early September?
Yes, we do. 2.
Yeah, we do too, yeah.
Okay. And thank you for your comments about the timetable. I should say that timetable may have to change at short notice depending on what happens, but we will. Our commitment is to have as open a budget process as we've had in previous years. Councillor McKee.
I would like to respond to the transparency issue. I think, thank you for your comments, Councillor Abbott. I think we, the Finance Department and the Cabinet in this authority are so transparent about the budget, and I've said this in other meetings, that if you don't understand the finances in authority, it means you haven't taken the time and energy to find out exactly what it is we're doing, because the transparency of where our finances are, where we spend our money, everything about it is absolutely totally transparent, and we spend a lot of time trying to make sure we have members' evenings and the like to make sure that members do understand exactly where their money goes, the residents' money goes, and how it's spent and how it's used, and get value for money. So thank you for your comments.
Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, are you happy to note the recommendation to note the 23-24 budget process timetable is detailed in the report? Agreed? Thank you. That moves us on to item 9A, which is standing in my name, which I would summarise as Councillor Mrs Walters resigned as the appointment from this council to the Citizens Advice Braintree, Halstead and Witham, and will be replaced by Councillor Justin Wrench. Are you happy to accept that recommendation?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. On to agenda item 10A, Councillor Cunningham, our Braintree Town Centre Public Realm Improvement Scheme and Maintenance Programme. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. This paper updates on the final stages of the public realm pedestrianisation project in Braintree and requires a vehement from the Horizon 120 projects to accommodate the overspend on the project and capital expenditure to fund a comprehensive stewardship maintenance plan. It is regrettable that the project has overspent. However, we can report the near completion of works with final installations of monolith signs having been recently installed in the town centre, pointing to the history heritage of Braintree, a key component of the visionary work that was carried out with businesses, residents, community groups, retailers in the years leading up to the commencement of works in 2020. Final works regarding snagging and power installations are being completed imminently, and we are very close to requesting Essex County Council highway sign-off for the new public realm. Thanks to the sound financial management and delivery across the portfolio of projects undertaken by Braintree District Council at the most challenging of times, particularly considering the rising build cost pressures, we are pleased that the overspend on Braintree Town Centre pedestrianisation has not put additional funding burden on the Council's capital programme. In no way will this impact works in other town centres. With regard to the stewardship upkeep of the new public realm, the investment outlined and the programme of maintenance shows BDC's commitment to the highest quality of maintenance. It is a surface that requires a lot of maintenance and cleansing, and full intervention can only take place once construction works completely cease. I'd like to thank Paul Partridge and the Braintree District Council operations team for their thorough work on working with this key component with our project team. In conclusion, I move the recommendations as set out in the public paper with regret for delay and overspend in completion, of which lessons have been learned within the Council, but acknowledge the tremendous scope of the project delivered in unprecedented times, fulfilling a long-term objective, helping to revitalise Braintree Town Centre, which a few short years ago was being referred to as dying in the local press. And despite the delays, nobody misses the pseudo-Victorian broken cobbled surface which we were all pleased in Braintree and those visit Braintree regularly to see the back of. Mr. Chairman, I move the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Any comments or questions on that? Councillor McKee?
I absolutely welcome this report. I know it's been a longer journey than we anticipated when we set out upon it, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. And actually, looking back on it, it's not worth worrying about where we should have been. Where we are now is what's important. And I know there's been a lot of social media comments, but if people actually can think what it was like when people were falling over in the high street and we were having insurance claims because people were falling over on cobblestones that should have been replaced earlier, if they can cast their mind back and now walk up the high street, and I do it, I'm probably one of the people in the room that does it probably more often. I live in the town, I shop in the town, and therefore I walk up probably 3 or 4 times a week, and it is remarkable how you can criticise it, but it's beautiful compared to what it was only 2 years ago. And I think the officers and the members who were involved in it, and there was a members' reference group, should be applauded sticking with it, even though a lot of criticism. It is remarkable, and it's an improvement for the town, and not just the town actually. And everyone forgets this is the centre of our district. So even if you live in Whitton, or you live in Halstead, or you live in other villages, this is what people judge the district by, is what is the centre of that district look like, and it's now a way nicer place to, and actually also with the buildings that have gone on behind the library, all of that town centre now is in the 21st century rather than the 19th century. Thank you. I'll finish my comments there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to add to some of those comments, this project tested the resilience of not just the Cabinet member, but us as a Cabinet and certain council officers too. And for that, they will have my endearing commendation for seeing the project through. We had a vision, we stuck to that vision, and we delivered that vision with aplomb. Obviously, some of the hope now is that we can transcend that across Whitsun and Halstead, and I'm sure the Cabinet member has that front and centre of his mind. And it truly is a remarkable location to come to now that we're finally getting towards the finishing line and getting it over the line for those that live in the Bridge District. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any other comments? I'd just like to add to what Councillor Ritchie said. This was a massive project. To take it on in the period of time that we were experiencing with pandemic and the problems that we had with the one of the original contractors, etc. I want to say thank you personally to Councillor Cunningham for doing that, and also for the officers, because it has been a team effort. I think it's also shown honesty between members and officers in dealing with that difficult situation, and I think we've benefited from it. And as Councillor Cunningham has said, there are some lessons that we have learnt from that as well. But I think that shows the strength of the organisation and not the weakness of the organisation. So I think we can look forward, and I just hope that when Father Christmas visits it this year, he will find it suitable for him. Maybe someone could pass that message on to Father Christmas. Right, okay. If there are no other things, you're happy to accept the recommendations contained in paragraph 2, 2.1 to 2.3. Is that approved? Agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 11A, Fusion Lifestyle Grounds Maintenance of Leisure Facilities. I draw to the attention of members that there is a confidential appendix A, which is in your report. As usual, I don't really want to have to go into the private session. Is there anyone who feels they will want to raise any issue on that confidential appendix? No? If not, then what we will do is we will take the paper as in part 1 as agenda item 11A, and at the same time we will note the confidential appendix in agenda item 11A in the confidential part. So without more ado, I'll ask Councillor Richard Van Dolken to introduce the paper.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this report seeks approval that BDC enters into a new service contract with Fusion Lifestyle for the grounds maintenance of the leisure centres in our 3 towns, the 3 leisure centres. BDC is providing the service to the, I must say, overwhelming satisfaction of Fusion, as I understand, since 2013, so just coming up to 10 years. And at the termination of the most recent contract, we were asked to quote for a new 5-year period from the 1st of September of this year to August 2027. This, by the way, it wasn't a tender. I understand we were the only, we were the company that was asked to quote. The 3 options are before you in the report. First of all, to do nothing, or decline to quote, which would involve a loss of income, plus perhaps as importantly, the ability to ensure that the surroundings of our leisure centres are kept in a condition which we would like to see. The second option is to provide Fusion with a 5-year contract that they are looking for. However, as it's quite clear with inflation, to quote for a 5-year period from now involves huge risks when quoting on a purely fixed income basis. So the third option was to provide Fusion with a new 5-year service contract, but to apply an annual price increase based on the consumer price index. Fusion has accepted this approach, and it's the preferred option, as it carries much less financial risk for the Council. So, subject to Cabinet's decision, Council will quote Fusion in line with the recommended option, and a service contract can be formally signed.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dolken. Any comments or questions at all? Councillor Tattersley.
Yes, Councillor Van Dolken mentioned that Fusion are very pleased with the standards that have been maintained at the Leisure Centre by our operations team. And of course, they're in a good position to comment on that because they've got leisure centres and facilities all across the country, and we're being measured against those others. And for them to specifically say how pleased they are, I think is a commendation to the operations team.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? No? In that case, are you happy, members, to accept the recommendation in para 2.1 of the report to agree that the Council will enter into a 5-year service contract, etc.? Agreed? Thank you very much. Right, members, that brings us, as we do not need now to go into private session for the confidential appendix to that last report. That brings us to the end of the agenda for this evening, and I will declare the meeting closed at 8:32. Thank you very much indeed.